Could you do me the tremendous favor, now that we've made it through the technical difficulties, of giving us a good expository on what the hell the Jimmy Kimmel Michigas is?
Yes, Michigas slash pretty blatant violation of First Amendment. So here we go. Monday is Kimmel's first day back since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He says only two things that could be interpreted as offensive. We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. So let's pause on that. He then mocked Trump's morning because Trump would ask a question about Kirk and pivoted to talking about his new ballroom. So Kimmel is wrong. He's not a newsman. It's a premise for a joke, right? It's a subordinate clause in a setup for a joke, which
Quick
if we don't allow.
Quick interjection. Joke was pretty funny. The goldfish joke that he segued to was pretty funny. I just wanted to get that in there. It's important that we do that. Okay,
yes.
Continue.
Yeah. And even the cut, it's very satisfying to see the president say ridiculous things and then have a comedian mock them for being ridiculous. I've never objected to that if the mockery is good for any president or anyone. And what Trump literally asked, are you all broken up about Charlie Kirk? He's like, oh, yeah, sure. Let me talk about my ballroom. It was funny. I hadn't seen that clip.
Yeah.
So it is odd that Kimmel on Monday would be asserting, oh, they're desperately trying to say it wasn't MAGA. So maybe it's worth a couple of minutes. And you tell me if you want to do that now, or we could.
Yeah, let's play the Kimmel clip, the clip that triggered the suspension. I want to see it. I want to react to it in a naturalistic manner. So let's get that up there.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Okay. And then he segues into the goldfish thing. The goldfish joke, I thought was funny. I don't think what he was doing right there before it was funny. And I actually think, Mike, because people are outraged about the government getting involved in this and asserting leverage, jawboning, for instance, I do think there's an impulse to perhaps understate the offense of the comment, because that's just how we have these cancellation conversations where it almost seems like if you're talking about how offensive it is, you're implicitly suggesting that a punishment should follow. And my take on it is I don't want anybody fired for any offhanded comment. I feel like any sort of just extemporaneous or even planned a comment you make, you should be able to walk it back. I don't want to live in the society where somebody says something wrong and they just get booted off the stage and that's that. I don't think that's comfortable. I think we want people's honesty. But I've seen a lot of people, Mike, just have a blind spot to how this could really piss people off. Yeah, Bill Carter, the great Bill Carter, who wrote about the late night wars, he was on Matt Bellamy's podcast. And I had to regard him as somebody who is in a deep blue bubble, even though I think he has expertise and knowledge of the television industry, because he seemed utterly perplexed as to why anybody could find this at all offensive. He said, well, he didn't criticize Charlie Kirk. And it's, look. Jimmy Kimmel was suggesting that the person who killed this beloved figure of this movement, the perhaps most popular conservative activist, was indeed a fellow conservative. I feel like that's obviously something that's going to piss people off if they're invested in that movement and they're really angry at the act of political violence from an outsider killing their guy. You go on network TV and you suggest, we can say suggest because I think Kimmel is saying that he didn't mean it explicitly, but that's what's conveyed. That's obviously offensive. It's something that should probably be walked back. And I say that as somebody who doesn't want this outcome, but I think it's important to at least just note that part.
Yeah. So let's analyze why that was even in Jimmy Kimmel's head and then how that subordinate clause of a setup came to be in so many other people's heads, including, and I heard you talk about this, Brandon Carr, who was jawboning / implicitly threatening in a way that played out exactly as he laid it out, that Kimmel should be silenced, taken off the air.
Yep.
So There was the idea after it was publicized what was written on the casings or on the bullets that the shooter fired, in one case fired at Charlie Kirk, and then 3 bullets that were unfired. Spencer Cox said this at his press conference, and this was what was actually written. And one was "Catch This Fascist," and the other one was the Italian anti-fascist song, and then there was a furry reference. There were many elements, I would say, of the left, and this was true on the left, Blue Sky, who immediately said, this does not show that he was anti-trans or anti-fascist. And now you and every regular literal person thinking about this saying, "Catch this fascist," about of a bullet doesn't show he's anti-fascist. The theory is this could be a double bank shot of the Groyper movement, which is associated with really far right, I would say fringe, but they've been invited to dine with Trump at times. They hate Charlie Kirk for not being right enough, for being pro-Israel. And so the thought was, among not only the fever swamps of Blue Sky, but other areas I'll get into, that actually what it shows is that he was this Groyper, this ultra right-wing guy, plausibly. Yep. The LA Times does an interview with a supposed disinformation expert. I mean, that's her title at Boston University, Joan Donovan. She's been celebrated, but also she's been somewhat or very discredited. There's a great piece in the Chronicle of Education about how she left Harvard under a storm of acrimony. And she lays this out. Oh, no. Let me explain what all these memes are. And part of it was, it's just shit posting. It's just meaningless memes to try to confuse you. But the other assertion, and it wasn't it could, or it's plausible, or it may be, but no, what I think it is it's Groyper rhetoric. From this, not just Jimmy Kimmel, who lives in LA and maybe reads the LA Times, Jamel Hill of The Atlantic, late of ESPN. She posts this Joan Donovan interview and writes that Charlie Kirk was the victim of a white supremacist gang hit. If she's wrong, she takes that down. But I'm just laying this out there that you don't have to be a fringe lefty to get the idea, the mainstreamed idea, that this wasn't about anything about trans ideology or even fascism, that it was, in fact, what Kimmel obviously thought it was, or else he wouldn't embarrass himself by saying that or putting it in a premise that it was something like the right wing killing Charlie Kirk.
That is so well said. And it's such a great point. And in a way, it's almost humanizing Kimmel, or not humanizing, but just trying to explain how this guy wasn't evil or a liar, but he's in a bubble. And he doesn't know he's in a bubble. I would go farther, and I would say Bill Carter and a lot of people talking about this in media don't know they're in a bubble. I knew that this wasn't the case. I know people were saying they taped that show early Monday. More came out. Dude, there was enough out there to confound that particular narrative. When it immediately happened, I thought it might be a Groyper, potentially. I remember that the Groypers showed up to Charlie Kirk events and were asking aggressive questions about Israel, and that was a feature of it. So it could have been somebody like that, or I don't know, just a crazy person off 4chan. I think what's complicated with people who do big acts of terrorism or violence is that you have killers who are their own idiosyncratic. They're crazy. They're crazy. They don't map onto anything. And we argue about
truly
who did
crazy, like getting messages through the TV about grammar, which was
yes, like Son of Sam crazy. We have no way of mapping on to what they do. But the complicated thing is also there are killers who have a logic to what they're doing, and it's downstream of an ideological perspective, and it's in the air. Yeah. And I think we really struggle.
And then there's also a lot in between, right?
Yeah.
The killer who, but for the political rhetoric, wouldn't have directed his or her insanity in that particular direction.
Yeah, it's all true. I think further complicating it is that I want free speech to exist. I do think the things we say can lead to acts of violence in the world. So it's almost like I need us to pretend like that can't happen, because once we start acknowledging that happens, then people want to start putting restrictions, and the ends are not worth those particular means or whatever. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. I don't know.